The role of the commander was the most significant contributor to British losses at the Battle of the Somme in 1916. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following in your answer. General Haig, the war of attrition. You must also use information of your own. 16 marks. Total for spelling, punctuation, grammar and use of specialist terminology, 4 marks, for a total of 20 marks. Here's the mark scheme for this question, which you can find out about in more detail in our overview video. But essentially here, it's really important that we reach judgment because the questions asked us, how far do you agree? So the first thing you need to do is decide whether or not you agree. If you agree, you need to be thinking about why you agree. If you don't, also why you don't agree, but maybe is there another factor? Is there something else that you think was maybe more important or more significant perhaps? So that brings us on to AO2, which is worth 10 marks, and that is your analysis of causation and consequence. And which one of those is will depend on the specific question that you've been given. But really, when the examiner says analysis, they're just looking for you to explain why. So whenever you give a statement, whenever you give a judgment or opinion, you just need to explain why. That brings us on to AO1, which is worth the next 6 marks, and that is for your knowledge and understanding of the period. So when you're explaining your thinking, try and bring in some evidence from your own knowledge to support that judgment and also to show the examiner that you know your stuff, you know the topic quite well. It is really important that you go beyond the stimulus points given to you in the question because unfortunately you can't progress into the higher bands or to the top marks if you aren't going beyond the stimulus points. The final 4 marks are for your spelling, punctuation and grammar. Here are the bottom 2 bands for this question, which are also explained further in the overview video. But you might notice that we're seeing words like straightforward, not developed, general, lack of coherent organisation, knowledge is limited. So if you're scoring in these bands, it might just mean that you've given some statements, but they're not explained fully. So try and bring in evidence from your own knowledge to explain why you've said that. Try and be specific as well. You know, if you're just giving sort of overarching themes, then maybe it's difficult for the examiner to score you highly. So if you can give some specific examples or be really precise with your points, then that's also really positive. Also, in terms of organisation of ideas and structure, make it as easy for the examiner as possible. So state really clearly, what are you arguing? Do you agree or do you disagree? And then make it clear as you go through why you think what you do. So the examiner can see exactly what you're arguing. These are the top 2 bands for this question. To score highly on this question, your explanation will be analytical. So you've explained fully what you think. You've made it really clear to the examiner what your opinion is and why you think that. You've drawn on your own knowledge. You've picked relevant bits of evidence to support that judgment. Your answer is relevant, it's directed to the question, so it stays really tightly focused on the topic that they've given you. It's easy to follow and it shows that you've got a really good understanding of the topic as a whole. Remember that there are also 4 marks available for your spelling, punctuation and grammar, so just try to take extra care when you're writing that your spellings are correct, that your sentences are structured properly, and just secure those 4 marks because this is a decent proportion of the paper, so try and get as many marks in there as you can. There are many points you can make here, so as long as what you say is relevant and correct, the examiner will give you the marks. But let's take a look at some examples. This question is a really good opportunity to assess General Haig's failures in the Battle of the Somme. So if you can bring in evidence from your own knowledge, then you can score really highly on this question. So you could, for example, if you've chosen to support the statement, say that Haig's command determined the way in which British forces fought at the Somme, so he has to be held responsible for the outcomes. He was even called the butcher of the Somme by some people, because he continually ordered conventional tactics that weren't actually particularly suited to the conditions of the Somme, and he was reluctant to try any new military tactics, in spite of the traditional ones being ineffective and making the battle much more costly. There's a lot more detail you can go into here, but as long as you are explaining the relevance of that evidence to the question, then this can be a really high scoring question. So do take a look at the rest of the points to see if there's anything you could have added to your answer.